Welcome everyone to interview number 23 of OSU Improvement Month. Today with KHZ. Oh my god. Hello.
Yo, hello,
Yes.
what's up?
Also known
I am
as
you.
KHZ.
KHZ, KHZ. Oh no. First discussion already.
Oh no. What's the correct way to say it?
I do not care.
Is there
I
is
literally do not care. It's both is correct. I go with KHZ usually, because I don't know. That's just my accent, I guess. But I'm fine with both.
is there a story behind it? The name?
My name? Well,
Yes.
KHZ is just short for my real name, Kelvin Hertz. And
Oh,
people
what?
just like tend to call it kilohertz, which is like my nickname, I guess.
What? That's big brain. Oh
Yeah,
my god.
it's literally so cool. I love my name.
Okay, so now that we know your name, let's learn a little bit about who you are. I'm sure most people are probably familiar, but just in case, could you give a brief introduction to who you are in the community and what people probably recognize you for?
So I do play a lot of Osu. I'm a speed stamina player. Played OWC last year. I stream a lot on Twitch, or I used to stream a lot on Twitch. I'm kind of inactive right now for various reasons. Yeah, and that's probably like pretty much what I'm known to be for in the community. Maybe like my deceit number one, which got sniped recently by Emric. Thank you, Mr. Diamond Block.
Oh,
Yeah.
what was so attractive about speed and stamina to you? What made you want to start specializing in that more than anything else?
That goes way back in the origin of like when I started playing. Because like back in the day, when we're talking 2016, 2017, maybe 2018, when like Arison was the only speed player. It felt like Arison was the only speed player.
Yeah, that's true.
No offense. But like he was like so far ahead, could do 270. I remember like clips of him where he played Honesty DT. Not the 5-star, like the OG Honesty, the real one.
Oh, the one by Bibbidi Bell.
Yeah, and he had like the first, I don't know, 10 seconds or something, and that went viral or something. And that inspired me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna be the first person to stream 300, which hi Mirami didn't work out.
Oh no.
But yeah, my goals kind of shifted, and now I'm like, yeah, I just want to learn 300 for myself.
So at the time you were less focused on speed stamina. Were you more of like like sort of typical aim player, or what exactly was your playstyle starting out?
That's actually a good question because it's been like 6 years.
All right. So okay, well let's start a little further back. So you found the game in late 2016. Is there a story to how you came across the game?
I was watching a German commentator, commentating YouTuber who just did some storytelling. Ikanix or now, I don't remember his new name. He renamed to something with C. I don't watch him anymore. But that's where like, he had like background gameplay. Usually CS:GO Surf, and on some random video he just said Osu, and I was like, "Holy shit! This game looks so stupid. That's perfect for me."
That's
I'm
funny.
allowed to swear, right?
Yeah.
Just like a little. Okay.
So you made your account at that time, but it seems like you weren't super active in the game, or you played somewhat. Looking at your graph right now, but
Yeah.
what was your early motivation for continuing to play the game back then?
Might sound kind of cringy, but I always wanted to be a pro player in any game, and I had a really competitive mindset basically from day one. But back in the day, I was playing other games like CS and stuff, and I was like, okay, I can't play like 10 games at the same time. I gotta decide. And after just playing Osu casually for 1 or 2 years, I decided on maining Osu because simply for the fact that it's that I can play it alone. I don't need teammates, and I'm not dependent on teammates performing. So in CS, I didn't have any friends that could get on all the time, play with me all the time, practice with me all the time. And if they didn't perform, well, we could lose rounds, and it wouldn't even be my fault. If I lose an Osu, it's always my fault.
Yeah,
That's kind of why I picked on Osu as being my main game.
I can actually relate to that a lot because I think at the time that was one of the main things about Osu that was really cool to me as well, where it's like it's just all you, right?
Yep.
So you started taking the game more seriously. Was that like late 2017 or late 2018? I'm trying to tell based on your graph. It looks like maybe late 2018 when your play count started spiking a lot more.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I had more interest in the game the further I went. Like, the game has ever since become more important to me. The time I put into the game doesn't really reflect how important it was to me, but if you look on on my graph right now, you can see a small spike in like October 2017.
Right.
And then like small decay again. I actually don't really know why that happened. I think I just kind of focused on the game. Oh yeah, wait. Okay, no. I do remember what happened. Okay, so I got a tablet after 3 months, and then I kind of didn't like play well with it.
Oh.
So I had like a small drop in play count, and then was like, okay, I'm gonna learn tablet now. So I had like a lot of hours put in, and then I don't know, just flattened out a bit again. Until I decided like in July 2018, okay, this is gonna be my main game, and then stuff happened.
So what made you still come back to the game casually before you started taking it more seriously? Was it just kind of like a game that you could play in queue or while you're waiting for other games, basically?
Wait, I don't quite get the question.
So like, why did you like? So before 2018, you were playing Osu just casually. What was your reason for sticking with the game, even as a casual game? Like, did you have any inspirations or other friends that were also playing the game?
Well, as I said, I always had a competitive mindset, kinda. Even when I started playing the game, I played the game in somewhat of a casual manner, but I still tried my best to improve when playing. So throughout my entire Osu history, improvement really has been my main point of motivation, I'd say. But of course, I had a larger focus on other games at that time. But just in general, I really like listening to music, and when I wanted to find some new songs, I just hopped on Osu and play a few beat maps. That was pretty much my only motivation. Just listening to music, doing something while listening to music. Whenever I got bored, didn't have teammates to play with, I could play Osu.
I know these days you are a big fan of Touhou Project. Is that something that you discovered through Osu?
Yes, definitely. All the Touhou maps, oh my god, they're so good. I got into the music genre, all the Demetori songs, and then I found out, wait, I see this Reimu girl like everywhere. Who is she? And then I kind of got into the scene.
Ah, I see. Have you played any of the original games?
I did. Touhou 6, I think, was like the one I liked the most.
Oh.
Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, I think it was, or something like that along the lines.
Let's go. So you mentioned competitive mindset a couple times. What exactly is that? How does it differ from any other way of thinking? Like, what are some of the key characteristics you feel like you had within your mindset that really pushed you to improve?
Just said very basically, whenever I play, my focus is on improving. That, like, straight up job. Like, I don't care about like any other things like my stats or something, my PP, my rank or anything. I actually didn't even know about my rank, about PP, like until like way further in my playtime. I've never checked my profile. I just hopped on the game and played. And I just wanted to get better with whatever I had.
Are there any routines?
So that's kind of like, sorry.
Are there any routines that you used back then to, I guess, really focus on improvement? Like, did you have any like improvement routines, or did you just go through random maps in your song list?
What kind of time are we talking about? Like before
back then.
2018?
Yeah, back then.
Back then, I just played whatever I liked listening to and whatever was somewhat challenging to me.
Okay, and then it seems like that started to change once you started taking the game more seriously.
Yeah, I selected my maps more after like what kind of skill sets I wanted to improve at. Of course, I don't really think you can make out many skill sets in like the low 3-star range.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter if I'm playing a 3-star tech map or a 3-star anime song. It's kind of just like whatever I like to listen to. It's still just like small jumps, small sliders.
Okay. Someone asked, we can touch on this question now. They said, did you start off by playing 6+ star maps, or did you get better gradually? Can you touch on this a little bit?
Yes, I just started from the very bottom. Back in the day, I didn't have many maps installed, so I just went into my folder, sorted by difficulties, and I tried to S rank every map I had installed on that star ratings. So I had like 50 1-star maps, so I tried to S them all, and then I went on to 2-stars, and that's how I progressed until like 4 or 5 stars when I had like tens of thousands maps and didn't do it anymore.
Oh, wow. So did you sort of basically sort your song list by difficulty, or did you group them, or like did
50-50.
you? Okay. Interesting. So kind of pushing for S ranks.
Yeah, nowadays I just do no grouping and sort by artist. By artist.
Yes, let's
By artist
go.
gang.
Superior sorting method. Okay, I'm joking.
The sorting methods.
So I'm curious, once you started taking the game more seriously, were you focused on speed and stamina from the beginning, or were there other skill sets that were more interesting to you at that time?
Well, I was heavily inspired by Ariston, as I already said, or Gaze McBee back in the day. So that was my long-term goal. But for the time being, I just wanted to get comfortable around 4 stars. 4, 5, 6 stars. So about the point where you actually can start to like really branch out to different skill sets.
Okay, makes sense. So I assume you were sort of gravitating towards speed and stamina at the time?
Well, depends on what time. Like the time, like if we talk before 2018, no, because there were literally no streams in 3-star maps.
Right. I would say like late 2018, early 2019, once you started branching out to higher star maps, or was it still mostly based on the song?
Well, of course, I always play what's fun to me, but improving usually is what is fun to me. So it's kind of like both, I guess. Okay. It's hard to say because whenever I started going further from 5 stars, like pushing into 6 stars, I played maps like the Big Blacks featuring like small streams, and that's kind of how I got introduced into streams, if that is your question. But I also tried maintaining my other skill sets, like just normal jump aim. I remember playing a lot of multi, actually, now that I think about it.
Ah, interesting.
So I had a bit of everything.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And also, it sort of, I feel like, oh, what? Uh-oh.
That was a dog.
I feel like multiplayer sort of reinforces that like consistency in a sense, and just sort of being able to play whatever maps people pick.
Yeah, pretty much. Because you're forced to play what others think they want to play.
Right. So I believe, long story short, you ended up making a document that people know as the KHZ method that focuses on long stream maps. So I remember in the doc you mentioned that like even you back then had to take quite a while to get comfortable even at 140 BPM. So can you touch a bit on like your starting point when it comes to how comfortable you were with streams once you really started to practice them?
I was totally trash. I could not stream 7 notes of any BPM. I couldn't do anything. I didn't have any experiences. I wasn't a piano player. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any rhythm game experience. The only thing that somewhat could have influenced my my streaming was the fact that I played CS, and in CS, if you know, when you bunny hop or when you strafe, you like alternate between your keys A and D while it's moving your mouse. So actually, when I started off, I used that knowledge and I started off being a ring index player, but I actually moved over to middle index, so the other way around, reverse trend, guys, because I thought, okay, other top players play like that, so I gotta do. I have to do,
Oh, that's
which of course
interesting.
isn't right, but yeah.
Was there a difference in comfort for you? Like, was ring index actually more comfortable at the time?
Well, yeah, because I used the same tapping style I used when strafing in CS.
Oh, even the same keybinds?
Yeah, I play with A and D.
So from there, you switched to index middle, and you were first starting to break into getting used to like moving your fingers properly. What were your first steps in that process? What did you do at first? Did you go straight to long stream practice maps, or did you just try to find maps that had like really short bursts and like really short streams? Or what exactly did you do to first start getting comfortable moving your fingers back and forth?
So I think it's important to mention that I switched to middle index like just shortly after joined the game. So I wasn't able to really play anything. So I played like 2-star maps, maybe
Okay.
max. But the like what got me into actually no, I used to be a full alt player. That's how I first got introduced into alternating my fingers. I
Oh,
used to full alt everything.
interesting. So even as like a brand new player, you were alternating?
First thing I did was alternating, like absolutely, because I
Uh,
saw the most potential in it.
I see. It sounds like it didn't actually have an influence over like you, like it didn't naturally make you more comfortable with streams though. It seems like you still had a lot of trouble playing
Yeah,
actual streams.
I couldn't play streams at all. Like alternating and streaming is something completely different
So,
for me, at least. Or not completely different. I take that back. I formulated that wrong. But um, like alternating sliders and then like 2 or 3 jumps is something different than doing like 140 BPM long stream practice.
so
That's what I meant to say.
did you start off with long stream practice, or what exactly were your like first steps in getting used to streaming?
Well, as mentioned earlier, after I branched out from 5-star maps, I started getting into stuff like the Big Black, and then I like played a couple streams and bursts here and there on like different maps. But at the same time, I also goofed around with the long stream practice maps. So
Okay.
I kind of did both at the same time.
So what was so I guess like what made you want to start using long stream practice maps, and like what actually is the value of playing those maps? Like are they just for learning technique, or can they help you push your stamina, or what would you say is the most valuable part of long stream practice maps?
Exactly these two things. At first, you learn finger control and technique, and then you learn how to be more efficient over time. So if you have no control over your fingers at all, and you're starting out, that's what when I recommend playing like the alternating BPMs around 140 BPM, so you can get a feeling of having a consistent movement between your fingers, essentially. And then whenever you feel comfortable in that, you can start pushing your stamina by increasing the BPM.
Are there
So that's
any?
kind of the drill.
I see. Are there any really, I guess, uh, bad habits that you feel like you had when you were starting out? And are there any things that you did to start refining your technique more and more? Like, are there things that you tried to experiment with, or was it all just kind of focused on playing more comfortably?
I think it was mostly just playing more, getting more comfortable with all that I had. My worst mistakes back in the day was changing my settings all the time, especially my area. I swapped my area way too much. I think I
Uh-huh.
had like every area that exists, going from like 50 millimeters to full area.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I definitely do want to touch on aim a bit later on, but I want to sort of hone in on tapping since I think that's where most of the questions are from.
That's
Uh,
fine.
so, I know some people find that they feel stuck improving at streams. So, someone actually sent in a question to you. They said, my brain has been locked for at least a year now on any streams in this game. After practicing and trying as hard as I can to get faster, I still never see any improvement. Do you have any tips that could help someone like me who has been trying to improve for a long time but doesn't see any results?
Well, that's kind of a vague question, isn't it? Because I don't really get much info out of it. I don't know how that person practiced. I don't know how much time they spent in the game. Like you could say I've played for a year, but you only like played once every month. It's kind of hard for me to say like how dedicated you were, but usually if you have a good foundation, so like being able to play 5 stars somewhat comfortably, and then you start branching out onto easier streams, you should see improvement in some way. And 1 year is not that much time actually, in terms of Osu, I would say, because it took me like 3 or 4 years to like stream 170 or something at all. So I wouldn't really get dismotivated by not seeing progress.
I think that's a really good point to emphasize, actually, both of those. Although they don't answer the question necessarily, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, those are both. And I'll sort of try to reiterate what you said. Well, the first one, first of all, and this is actually just an important principle, really not even just when asking questions for OSU, but really just in general, that if you're trying to ask for advice on something, the more vague your question, the more vague the answer will be as well. So you if you really want specific insights as to your situation, then you do need to be more specific with what you've already tried and the things that you've actually been doing so that people can take that information into account. But yeah, I think that first of all, but also your point that it took you like a long, like probably much longer than people realize to get sort of anywhere, I guess, when it comes to like in the grand scheme of like long stream practice and stamina.
Yeah.
So it seems like in the beginning, well, actually, okay, I do want to touch a little more on this question and sort of ask, are there any very common mistakes with technique or practice habits that you've noticed people do? I know you've done a bit of coaching slash analyzing other people's gameplay, and I'm sure you've had many,
Mm.
many, many people come to you and ask for advice either in stream or wherever else. So are there any very common things that people ask you or that you notice in people's gameplay that you sort of want to mention here?
Mm. Trying to think a bit. I do think that things really vary throughout the players. So there isn't like one tip I can give that everyone does wrong in the beginning. It's like one player does this wrong, one player does this wrong. But it's really hard to say. The only thing I really have to that one thing that's stuck in my mind, let's say that, is that people tend to get their force from tapping through their fingers and not from somewhere else. So they don't utilize the power of strain, and they genuinely just have a poor technique. I could elaborate on this if you want to.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
So in my world, in my head, there's three main ways where you can get your tapping strength from. The first way would be your fingers. So if you just put your arm on your desk, your wrist on your desk, and your fingers, also your fingertips on the desk, and you only move your fingers, that's like the power you can get from your fingers. Usually, when you single tap, though, you use your arm or your wrist. So you start moving your wrist and have your arm basically fixed on the table. That's like wrist tapping, I guess. And then you can also have your arm kind of fixated on like the edge of your desk, like Lifeline does, and then move your entire arm and single tap like that. Depending on what kind of method you use, you will have different benefits and disadvantages. From my experience, the more you tend towards the arm tapping technique, you will be faster, but also have less control. And the other way around is just the other way around. So if you tap with your fingers, you will have more control, but less stamina, less strength, etc., etc. Does
So-
that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so then if you use a wrist, is that kind of the ultimate balance between the two?
Good question. I do think both can work. If you look at recent star Mexican player Rose, he essentially only has wrist tapping until his stamina dies and he switches to finger tapping. If you look at his hand cam, I personally do mostly finger tapping, some wrist, but mostly finger. Now, the point I was making earlier isn't that people play based on finger tapping, because that's not wrong. Like, you have to move your fingers. You can't just tap with your wrist. You can't if you do the wrist tapping or arm tapping, you're essentially gonna do double tapping. You have to alternate with your fingers. That's essential. But people get their strain, like they strain with their tapping fingers, and that's the issue I meant. People used to strain with their tapping fingers, and you need to strain with something else,
Okay.
being your arm, maybe your wrist, maybe your thumb. You can see Eternal crunching in his thumb finger, for example. You can see Arison stretching out his pinky like it's flying to the moon.
Okay, that actually makes sense. So if you're using finger tapping, quote unquote, then you're basically deriving all of the energy from and all the sort of momentum from your actual tapping fingers. And when you're tapping with wrist tapping, for example, then you're moving your wrist around a little bit. And that's sort of where the majority of the strain is coming from. But you're basically using both finger movement and a bit of wrist movement and energy as well. And then with arm tapping, you're sort of doing all three because you can't really move your arm and your fingers without also moving your wrist. That would be very weird.
Arm tapping isn't really viable when streaming.
Yeah, that
unless
does
you
make sense.
Double tap.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. So for streaming, it seems like sort of loosening out your actual tapping fingers and
Yeah.
kind of deriving the energy from somewhere else is sort of the-
Exactly.
okay. That makes sense. So-
Exactly.
Were your tapping fingers very loose from the beginning? Like, were you using wrist tapping for streams from the very beginning, or was that something you kind of had to unlearn your, I guess, bad habits of tapping with your fingers?
Yes, of course, my technique was very, very trash in the beginning. But when I branched out to the maps, as I mentioned already, so like going after everything beyond 5 stars, and I started doing the long stream practice stuff. That's what I did in my long stream practice moments, I guess. When I played the long stream practice maps, that's the entire drill, adapting my technique. At first, I was tapping just from strain from my fingers. I was tapping way too hard. I wasn't in sync with the song at all. I was over and under streaming all the time. That's exactly what you're learning when you're doing the long stream practice maps. You want to get used to having a good technique. And that's when and how I learned my technique, essentially.
Do you need to play long stream practice, like those long squares that a lot of people find them really boring? Is there other ways that you could kind of focus on the same thing? Like, could you just use normal stream maps,
You
or
do not need to play them. You absolutely don't need to play them. You can play any other map, that's just fine as well. But for me personally, it was just the most straightforward. If I'm playing streams, I will improve at streams. That's what my brain thought, so that's what I'm doing. It can be super boring. It is super boring for me sometimes as well. But I really just had the mindset to improve, and it, I guess, worked out for me. So I kind of just threw myself in the cold water and played and played and played. It's really 99% of it is dedication. Most people fail at dedication, I'd say. It's kind of like working out. Everybody could be very, very strong, very fit, but nobody just actually takes the time and to do like push-ups every day.
I feel like this relates a lot more to the competitive mindset that you were mentioning before, where it's a lot less about the specific tactics and strategies that you use to improve, but more that you were just willing to put up with being bad and just pushing yourself for so long. You mentioned like even 1 year is not that much time in the grand scheme of things, and I think that's probably one of the most important things that I want people to take away from this interview. Probably is that it takes a lot of time, a lot more time than you might think at that, but it takes a very long time of just consistent grind and just being so dedicated to improving as much as you can.
Yes. Totally agreed.
Okay, this is a good question, actually. So someone asked, why do you not have the long stream practice in your most played maps on your profile?
Well, they only counted for each diff, and I didn't play each diff like 500 times. So I played the 140 diff a lot, the 150 diff a lot, the 160 diff a lot, but like not 1,000 times. And if you look at my most played beat maps, I do have a lot of maps where I just have like over 2, 3, 5, 600 tries. So it's not really just up there.
Yeah, I think the real thing is that back then in like 2018, 2019, even like 2020, I'm pretty sure only ranked maps counted for your play count.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
that too.
yeah.
True, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that's the real reason, is that back then you didn't get play count or any stats from unranked maps.
Also, I'm using Digital Hypnos Mapset nowadays because it doesn't have any breaks.
Let's go. So, yeah, I was just going to ask that actually. Someone sent in a question. They said, are you still playing the long stream practice maps?
I'm playing all the map sets, but mostly yours.
But when you are practicing, you still sort of use that same routine of playing 3 times at the start and 3 times at the end of your session when you're really focused on practicing.
Okay, so the 3 times at the start and the 3 times at the end are kind of just the things I give to the people, like my guide, quote unquote.
Okay.
I don't actually sit there and count. Okay, I played once. I gotta play it twice. I gotta play it 3 times. I play it in the beginning until I'm warm. I play it in the end until I feel like I can't do anything anymore, or I don't want to anymore. So usually that happens after 3 tries.
Okay.
Because the first run is just getting warm. The second run is essentially after being warm, having like my second run usually is just much better than my first run, like much better. I'm talking about like going from D to like A, and then my third run is just like perfectioning my technique a little bit.
Right. That makes sense. Interesting. So from there, I think the most important thing that I'm actually hearing about this is just sort of staying dedicated for just an absurd amount of time, like longer than most people would want to wait, of just continuing to practice and being motivated to keep playing.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what exactly was your inspiration or like motivation to just keep playing? Like, were you seeing gradual improvements the whole time, or were there times where you felt like your skill level completely reset, or you just got so much worse for no reason?
All of the time, even right now. But that's just when you play less. Whenever I played less, I performed worse. I instantly noticed that. I just never really. I did care about my performance, but I never tried to let. I never wanted to let myself down because of my performance. I kind of just kept grinding, tunnel mindset, hop on and play. Doesn't matter how good you are, just push yourself. On that specific day. So if on Monday I can only stream 170 BPM, I will play 175. If on Friday I can play 300, I will play 310. I will always push myself in that specific moment. That's kind of just the mindset I had. If that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that sort of the less you play, like you start, I guess, playing worse in general. I want to ask a bit about taking breaks. Is that something that you feel like there's value in, or should you play like a little bit every single day, or does it really matter how you structure your play sessions throughout a week?
um, I never really took breaks. Like I was gone for a week on vacation maybe, but I never like didn't put my hands on the game for like more than a week.
Okay, I see.
But the only thing I really noticed from breaks is that you get hella rusty. But that's also why I did the break study thing. I was kind of curious if that had any impact, but apparently we didn't see many results.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good
Um,
point. The like the tapping stamina study. I think some people actually, so I want to clarify that because I think some people had the idea that it was about like different methods of practicing tapping stamina, but really it was about like taking breaks and
yep.
like if there's an optimal break length, so to speak, or if there's any correlation with like taking like X amount of days off per session. But yeah, I think as you mentioned, there wasn't really much of an influence on like the
The,
specific lengths.
yes, one thing before we move on and before I forgot it that I have to mention is that breaks do help with your mental. Like that's the number one reason why I would take a break. If you're burned out from the game, like I was before, take a break. Like pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone is very important. Also, maybe a bit beyond your mental capacity. But if you are literally in bed at night and crying because of Oser, you know you're doing something wrong.
That is definitely a good point. That's interesting because I feel like a lot of people when they mention taking breaks, they're talking about like giving your hands some time to recover and things like that, which I do still think has value, especially if you've been playing like 6, 8, or like 12 hours a day every single day. Then I think in that case, if your hands still feel like they're exhausted from the previous session, then you should most likely take a little bit more time before you try to hop on again. But I definitely agree with that. The mental side of when you take a break and it sort of like clears your head. I feel like a lot of people, when they come back from a break, they can read a little better in the game and like it just kind of looks a little more clear instead of, I don't know, feeling like all like not clear, I guess.
Interesting. About the exhausted hand thing, I actually did the exact opposite. I had days where I played 10 hours and above. Like I had very long sessions and my hand was getting really tired. I was getting really tired. And the next day I just kept playing. Like I
Uh,
didn't had any pain. If I had pain, I stopped playing, but I literally pushed beyond being exhausted, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I did it. I don't have carpal tunnel. Not wanting to put that on anyone else, but it worked out for me.
yeah, but it seems like when you did start out, you tried to focus a lot more on like building your foundation first instead of skipping steps, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like that's probably something that played a pretty big role in just getting more comfortable, or
Could be.
like not tensing up, or like using bad habits that would make you like strain, or like I guess have those sorts of symptoms of hurting yourself too much.
Yeah, pain is not good. Strain is though. At Ryuke.
You mentioned in your guide the stretching routine video from Taikedo Fitness. Is that something you always used, and is it something you still use? And how valuable is it to follow some sort of stretching routine?
Most of the time I do it whenever I have very cold hands whenever I start playing. So sometimes I hop on the game and I can't even tap 150 BPM. That's serious. I can dev stream 270 when I'm warm on a peak day, but I can sometimes not stream 150. That just shows how much you need to warm up, by the way. Um, I do have received I received the video from some German player like 2 or 3 years ago, and I did the stretches like every once in a while. So, yeah, either when I had cold fingers or whenever I felt like doing them. But doing them daily is probably the best.
You mentioned warm up. Someone asked a question. They said, I know that warm up is important, but how do you define warm up maps? And how do you know that you're warmed up?
Um, Warm up maps is really a quite weird term in my opinion. Um, if you're talking about having a set map pack you want to play every time you get on, that doesn't really work, I think. Because every time you hop on the game, you'll be at a different level. Like sometimes you don't need much warm up and you can play just fine. Sometimes you just need like 30 minutes, maybe even an hour to warm up. It really differs, I think. So warm up maps in that case are just maps you warm up on, I guess. And any map can be a warm up map if you make it one. So for me, it's just something that pushes yourself in the moment. And that's really, really, really the most important point, pushing yourself in the moment. Doesn't matter if you were able to stream 400 BPM a year ago. If you can't do it right now, then you gotta still challenge yourself in the moment.
That's actually a really cool way to define warm up, because it's like when you first get on, let's say on most days you can death stream, I don't know, 180 BPM. But right when you get on, if your hands are so cold and you can barely even tap like 130 or 140, then that's the BPM you want to start at right now. It's like you want to be playing at whatever difficulty your hands can do in that moment. And especially when you first get on, it can be like a lot lower than your usual skill cap. Is that, I think, a good way to think about it?
Yeah, pretty much. Play in the present, not in the future or the past.
So wise.
Deep quote. Deep quote. In that.
So, another thing about tapping technique, someone asked, have you ever experienced galloping? And if yes, do you do something about it, or do you just keep practicing stamina?
You know the mathy kinda finger control maps? Like near distant future?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, like the double section? That's where I sometimes gallop. Or used to gallop.
So, like on actual
Um,
doubles.
on actual doubles, I used to gallop if they were super quick. I don't really do that on long stream practice. Only when I really pushed into a new BPM and I tried messing around with my technique to get comfortable on the new BPM. So let's say I just got comfortable on 230 and now I'm streaming to trying to 40. And I'm trying to find that edge in the technique, like the little modification I can do to like push my speed and stamina a tiny bit, just so I can hold to 40. That's where I start going into different tapping techniques and also sometimes gallop. But it's not really a habit I made. Like I don't advise galloping if you can avoid it. It's just a sign of poor technique, in my opinion.
I'm glad you mentioned the like kind of slightly trying to experiment with your technique when you're trying to push a higher BPM, because what I've found is that yes, there's some value in sort of focusing only on technique, especially if you're learning streams for the first time, as you mentioned. But when you're pushing your stamina to the next BPM, you kind of naturally start to refine your technique more, because let's say you're only playing like 200 comfortably and now you're trying to push to 210. If your technique isn't quite efficient enough to tap that smoothly, then you end up needing to slightly refine or experiment with your technique to try using a little less energy and being able to tap just a little bit faster.
Yep. Pretty well said.
So, what is the relationship between, or like, how important is your technique versus your actual like raw stamina? Is raw stamina even a real thing, or is it all technique?
So stamina is like the end result, I'd say. And stamina comes from raw physical stamina and mostly technique. I would say it's like I can't really give numbers. I don't want to specify too much, but over 2/3, 3/4 of your stamina comes from technique. And I think the rest is just like pushing a bit, growing these muscles, getting used to that, expanding on your, I don't know, brain synapses.
Yeah, I think okay, that definitely makes sense. I feel like so on a similar note, how much of it is like your raw finger speed, or is it like when you say that technique is really important, like could you take someone who can barely stream like 140, 150 and then you sort of explain like the most optimal ideal 300 BPM technique and you have them basically emulate it? Are they then able to play that much better, or is there still a lot of grinding and practice that goes into it?
That's really, really, really far thought. Gotta think about it for a second. But I think they wouldn't be able to do it. Well, first of all, their brain had to adapt to the technique. But of course, if they did that and they had the finger movement, I think they still would need like the tiny bit of physical strength.
I think a big thing that I've found when it comes to technique is that improving your technique, technically, you can like sort of consciously change the way that you're actually tapping and experiment with different things. But refining your technique is really a result of, I guess, actually pushing yourself more and more. And it's something that your brain kind of does naturally with, I guess, improving the way that you actually tap as you push yourself gradually. So it's not like there are like, I guess, different ways of tapping or like actual techniques, but a lot of it does come down to, first of all, just finding whatever is comfortable for you. But from there, you have to kind of, it's like you have to like you have to like hold your brain by its hand and like kind of show it, lead it in the right direction slowly. It's like a very, very slow walking man, and you have to keep guiding it in the right direction because it'll get there. It has very long range of like how far your brain can take you to improve, but you do need to keep guiding it in the right direction, or else it's just gonna stay exactly where it is.
Yeah, I like that.
Someone asked another question. This is more about breaks, but they said, when you are grinding a lot, did you ever suffer really big fatigue?
Um, like physically speaking,
Yeah, I
because
guess.
except for the fact that I was tired and like getting dizzy
Oh
after
god.
playing for like 16 hours, probably not really, no. after I slept. I usually felt much better the day after. I did hurt myself like a little bit. I used to push my thumb into my keyboard and then I like kind of peeled into my fingernail, and I don't want to go into much
Oh my
detail.
god.
It's really disgusting, but I kind of got a bit bleedy on my finger on my thumb.
No.
But despite from that, I actually never really had any fatigue physically. I just got mentally exhausted, and I really mean it. I had days where it was just like, oh man, Osu. Whew.
Oh no.
It really got me, but I stand through it. Dedication.
So I want to stay on the topic of mindset a little bit. And you mentioned earlier that you focused entirely on improvement, but you didn't know what PP was. So, what is the difference between focusing on improvement and focusing on rank/performance points?
Well, if you focus on rank PP or anything like that, you're pretty much putting your focus to FCing a map or increasing your rank by getting scores, like good scores that have value for your profile rank. On the other hand, like focusing on improvement, it doesn't really matter what scores you set. It's literally just the ability of playing the game is important to you, which in the end it can result in similar results. But it's really that small thing that it's very important for you. It's really the small thing that's important in your mindset and that can mess over a lot of people. And that's just that you should not hyper focus on being able to set scores, and it's really just the ability that you have to play. Because you can get RNG PP scores,
Right.
and you won't be able to consistently do them, and that can affect your mindset.
I feel like it. Oh, you can finish.
No, I just wanted to say that the ability of playing the game doesn't change.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense actually. 'Cause I feel like it depends a lot on like what you're actually focusing on. Because I mean, there's been this sort of saying that like around the OS community for a long time, which is that like improving will increase your rank, but increasing your rank won't like make you improve. So there's
Well,
oh yeah, what do you have to say about
I kind
that?
of want to actually argue with that. Because if you increase your rank, well, then you're still focusing on getting scores and you're still trying to improve to get these scores. It's not a
Right.
terrible mindset, but it's just that it's kind of just like the wrong way of approach, in my opinion. Of
That's
course, play the
interesting.
game the way you want.
Right,
I
right.
mean, look at PP farmers. They're still very good and they're still very much improving.
Okay, that's a good point actually, because the ranking system actually does a pretty good job of kind of guiding you. Like if your top play is like 200 pp, then the next milestone is 210, and so you go look for a map that's just a little bit harder than what you were FCing before, and you try to FC that next map. But I think that where the problem really stems is if you're just looking for maps that are just free free PP without really being like, oh, this map is hard for me, but it would be a good top play, so let me go grind it and push myself more. I think that's like a healthy way to do it, which is what you're talking about. But there's the other way, which is like, oh, this map would be my new top play. It's a little outside of my comfort zone, but I don't feel like pushing myself that much. I'd rather go find a map that I can actually play comfortably that is just really overweighted and can.
This will get you stuck. This will get you stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what people are talking about when it comes to like focusing on PP can lead to, as you mentioned, basically being stuck but not actually improving the way that you would expect. Because there's sort of two different ways of I guess focusing on rank, as you mentioned. Because there's one way, as I mentioned, where you're actually pushing yourself, and then the other one where you're just looking for maps that are already within your skill level?
Usually, though, if you look for maps that are already within your skill level, eventually you'll reach a point where you have farmed everything, and you will have to branch out, like, unless you try to act fix the stuff. But even then, you're still pushing yourself.
Right, right.
So that's still important to keep in mind. Eventually, you're forced to go out of your comfort zone just from the game. If you want to increase your rank, that is.
So I want to go stay on mindset for a little longer. And you mentioned a couple times that you have sometimes really big changes in your skill level, even from day to day. How do you deal with sort of expectations that you put on yourself? Someone mentioned like when you set really okay, so someone said when you set really good scores on one day, don't expect to set good scores on the next day, otherwise you will just be disappointed, which I think we can both agree is pretty true. But do you have any sort of tangible or like actionable advice when it comes to not comparing yourself to what you were able to do in the past?
I feel like that's something that just comes with experience. It's hard to say because that's something that has to click in your head. That's something you have to get over yourself. That's a personal thing. I cannot tell you to do A or B. You and your head have to be set. Wait, how do you say that? It's actually I actually don't know how to say it. Not because English isn't my native language. It's actually just hard to put in words.
Like you kind of have to like naturally come to the realization yourself, basically.
I mean, you have to understand it. You have to understand that it's normal. You don't have to know it's normal. You have to understand it. You can know that 1 plus 1 equals 2, but do you understand that 1 plus 1 equals 2?
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make
You ca
sense.
Yeah, you as a person have to get you have to get it. You have to understand that that's normal. And if you do not understand it, if only I can tell this to you, you know this now, but if you don't understand it, it's like your mindset can still get affected by it.
Okay, that's actually a really good point to bring up, and I'm glad you did mention that because the specific words that we're using is a lot less important than the concept that we're trying to convey. And if you're able to sort of download that concept into your own head, I think that's what you're sort of saying is like you have to sort of have that concept actually sort of be understood within your head rather than just knowing the words that we're saying and being like, oh, okay, yes, very, very good information. I will write this down.
You can download, but you have to install it, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. That's wise. All right. One last tapping related question, at least for now. I'm sure there will be some that come in later, but someone asked, have you ever had your arm feel like it was burning for the entire day, even though you haven't played? They said, I want to play, but I've been feeling like this for a while.
So your arm hurts the entire day, like even when you stop playing. Or did I got that wrong?
Yeah. So like they haven't been playing, but their arm is kind of burning, like that sort of burning sensation.
Mm, so I do have burn in my arm when I play. That's just when I push though.
Right, right.
So when I push my speed stamina, I do have that burn. That's good. That's good. That means you're pushing your physical stamina. But if you have that outside of playing Osu, I don't know if that's actually healthy. And I don't know if that's actually also related in that case. Maybe it happened from Osu. I can't really tell. If it did, unsure. I'm not a doctor, but might want to see some.
If there's
If that burn still exists like days after not playing or anything. Because if you're just pushing and you have that burn in your arm, it's normal. But if it stops you from playing the game, it's not just a burn.
Right.
Like the burn shouldn't hinder you. The burn shouldn't hinder you. That's important.
The only idea I have is maybe that if you're not getting very good sleep and not able to rest and sort of recover between days, then you aren't giving yourself the opportunity for that sort of burning to go away. Potentially. So it could be because you're
Yeah,
not
I
sleeping
guess.
that well.
Yeah, I guess.
All
That'd
right.
be an attempt to fix it.
Oh, they said I haven't been sleeping too good. Yeah, that's probably what it is. And it's also possible that you're sleeping like on top of that arm, like the sleeping position. So it's like not getting enough like of a I don't know, like it's getting squished, so it's not actually recovering super well. But yeah, sleep is super, super important, especially for recovery. So okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about the aiming aspect. So I think we can combine the two to start off, both aim and tapping, because a couple people asked about how you are able to focus on aim control when playing speed maps or doing long streams. So how are you able to, I guess, balance the two between aim control and also pushing your tapping?
The way I focus on the game is actually, I think, that I play with the relax mod on. So I don't focus on my tapping at all. I just focus on my aim and try to sync my aim to the song, to the visuals. And my tapping is completely unconscious.
Is that a strategy that you would recommend people do like from the very beginning? Or is there certain times where you do need to focus on your tapping to make sure it's actually good enough to start doing that?
Well, if you're trying to push your tapping,
Okay.
because then you won't be able to do it. You will notice if you're able to do it, then you're comfortable with your tapping. If you're not comfortable with your tapping, you won't be able to do it. So on long stream practice maps, when you're pushing yourself, you will of course have to focus on your tapping. You will have to play around with your technique. But once you've found your technique, make it a habit, make it unconscious, not unconscious,
Yeah.
subconscious, something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then just focus on your aim, I guess.
Someone mentioned that when they focus on their aim, they can't tap properly.
Well, then it's just not second nature to you. It's kind of like writing. Like if you have to think about how the letter is structured when writing, it's not built into your muscle memory. It took me over 1,000 of hours to get there, so don't expect this to happen overnight.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize the way that I think about it is there's like different phases of when you're learning tapping. Like in the beginning, I think if you try to do it unconsciously, then you're just not going to get anywhere because you haven't developed that muscle memory yet.
No, that approach to the game can only really be applied once you're comfortable with what you can do.
Yeah.
So that's like for advanced players.
Yeah, which I think the broader lesson here is that like if you're relatively new to something and you're seeing all these people that have been playing for like 6, 8, or like 10 years and are super, super advanced, if you want to be able to get to their level, you should focus less on doing what they're doing now and focus more on doing what they did when you were in your position. If that makes sense. Like,
yep.
You don't want to, like, because you mentioned that, like, at your level now, you're able to just put your tapping completely on autopilot. But when you're relatively new to the game and you don't have that muscle memory, then you need to start building that first. And it goes with any other aspect of play, like that applies to aiming as well, or just any muscle memory in any skill-based activity at all. Okay. This is actually interesting. So someone sent a question in the chat, and then you typed your answer. But I actually want to have you elaborate on that a little bit. So I'm going to reread the question. So they said, "What do you think of using Back to the Gate sped up to practice stamina and tapping?" Which basically is a tapping practice, like burst speed, super draining type finger control type map. So can you sort of explain your answer and elaborate on it a little bit?
Yes. So there are these finger control spammy maps. In this case, Back to the Gate. There's also something some map called. I actually don't know the name. I know the diff name is Egg Pain or something. Maybe someone knows it and can throw it in the chat. It's like a loft map with like rate change. Chaos Fantasy, thank you. Perfect. Has a lot of finger control. That's like very stamina draining. So if you like have to start patterns again over and over again, like going into patterns, going out of patterns is really, really stamina draining and will improve your speed a lot. The difference is you won't really learn how to hold your technique. You will rather learn getting into and out of techniques. It both like long stream practice maps versus finger control spammy kind of maps is kind of like the topic here, I guess. And one just improves stamina in another way than the other, if that makes sense. It's really just what you want to improve at. And I think practicing both is pretty good.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, you said that those types of bursty maps will help with finger control speed rather than stamina speed, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure if I've seen anyone really describe it that way, because I know a lot of people say that, like, well, yeah, what I hear a lot of people say is that long stream practice helps with your technique mostly, and then finger control bursty, like going in and out of patterns, helps a lot more with your actual stamina. And then the two of them combined are what allow you to play with smooth technique and also with a lot of stamina. But they're sort of like slightly different. Like obviously one of them does help train the other as well. Like it's not like you're focused 100% on finger control and no technique or stamina or whatever. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you distinguish between the two in that way.
It's really, really interesting because I don't know how to phrase it. There isn't really a technical term the community has made up for it yet. But look at players like Red Pixel, for example. Insane finger control stamina. Plays she runs at I don't know how many BPM, like 280, 290. I literally don't know. But I cannot play that. My stamina dies. But on some dev stream maps, I can out-tap Red Pixel. And that's kind of the interesting point here. So there's different kinds of stamina, and that's really like what I differentiated when I said that.
Yeah, that's definitely a really, really interesting perspective that I think probably holds true to some extent, but yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that there's sort of like two different types of stamina.
Yeah, they're just really closely tied together. I don't actually think it's different kinds of stamina. It's just the finger control. The like maintaining a stream is also some kind of finger control. Going in and out of streams is also some kind of finger control. And I think the finger control you need for both kind of not playstyles. I'm missing the word. But the kind of finger control is just different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Okay. Just trying to explain everything that people can understand it.
Yeah. So, nice. Someone mentioned I used to be able to death stream anything from 170 to 240 BPM, but after I started playing more Senya maps and grinding them, which Senya maps are sort of like more generic in rhythm, they have like short bursts and some like short to long, not really long streams, but some short-ish streams, but mostly like very generic rhythm. I started playing more Senya maps and grinding them, and then I lost that death stream technique, even though I don't feel like anything changed. So, do you have any thoughts on that specific situation?
Well, if you stop playing aim maps, you will stop losing your aim. I think it's really just if you want to get back your death stream stamina, just go back and play the maps you were good at before.
Okay,
So
they said if I didn't stop playing death streams, but if I focus more on so Senya maps also have a lot of like triple spam, I guess, sometimes.
yeah,
But they said if I start doing one, then I stop being able to do the other.
I don't really like when wait. So they still play death stream maps, but forget how to play death stream maps.
Yeah, because they're mixing in a different type of map as well. Like they sort of can't have like the ability to do both at the same time. It's like they have to derust one of them or derust the other one, I guess.
That's a really specific case. I think usually if you keep playing all the skill sets, you will usually also keep the ability to play them. But of course, if you're messing around with your technique in other kinds of ways, you will maybe try to shift over that technique to the death streaming as well. That's just kind of my theory here. I think I would have to look into that a bit more to like give you a better answer actually. But maybe you're trying to use the technique you use for playing those triples or like the Senya, the patterns you have in Senya maps. Maybe use that technique in Death Stream maps because they will differ. And if they don't, then maybe that's your problem. Just a theory, though. I can't really tell just from those lines of text.
The way that I think about it is pretty similar, where it's like your like I think if you get rusty in a certain skill, it's because your technique wasn't like solid enough to keep all of that skill grounded, so to speak. Like your skill cap is dependent on your like actual mechanical skill and how far you push yourself, but your skill floor is dependent on how strong your fundamentals are. And when you sort of, I guess, if you take a break from a certain skill or just take a break in general, then you fall to the level of your skill floor and then gradually need to derust everything in between the skill floor and your skill cap or skill ceiling. And the stronger your fundamentals, the higher your skill floor is compared to your ceiling. And so the less you'd need to derust. That's sort of how I think of it.
Yeah, very theoretical, but I can agree.
Yeah, I do agree. It's a lot more theoretical, and it's not like I guess super scientific. I guess that means the same thing, but yeah.
That's a point I want to mention myself, really, because I like being super theoretical about things, but really in OSU you don't have to.
Yeah, I agree.
Thinking about things in OSU is great till a degree where it's wasting more time that you could use to practice.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm overthinking, I'm just like, okay, the longer I think, the less time I have for practicing.
Yeah, I think OSU actually kind of teaches you that lesson, so to speak, especially for people that find themselves like I guess overthinking a lot, because OSU is really one of those games that has such a simple premise that
there's
some degree of like ways you can practice slightly more efficiently, but and I think it does teach you like I guess practice like tactics as far as like the mindset around like analyzing your gameplay and figuring out what you're doing wrong. But in the grand scheme of things, like a lot of it does come from like I think the main lesson that you learn is that improvement comes from just doing way more like just dedicated practice and not concerning yourself about like if you're improving every single day or every single map that you play, you need to get a better score than before. I think being more okay with gradual improvements and the sort of fluctuation of skill level as well is something that I think OSU definitely can teach you in a sense.
well said.
All right. So the next question, there's another question about aim control that was sent in for you. Someone said, do you have any tips for controlling aim on speedy streams when they're above your comfortable BPM? I can occasionally play 210 for 50 notes, but most of the time I shake a lot and I lose rhythm. This happens with anything above 200 BPM. It's probably just a skill issue, but I still want to hear your thoughts.
Pretty well analyzed. It is indeed a skill issue, but what I can say to that is it's kind of like, everyone knows Plasmagun.
Yeah, the farm map.
That dev stream, the reason why it's a farm map is because people RNG the dev stream. Like, they RNG the spaced dev stream. Most people that, some people that farm it aren't comfortable on 270, and they have to RNG it. Kind of what you said, you kind of shake around a bit, etc., etc. But if you get more comfortable, you will be able to do what I explained earlier with the relax kind of approach to the game, where your tapping is really subconscious and you can really focus on your aim. And that is what is essential for playing space streams. If your tapping is not comfortable, you will not be consistent on space streams ever.
I'd like to draw everyone's attention to this clip.
Oh my god. Okay, so that clip is a mixture of nerves and me having to focus on my tapping over my aim. That is a mixture of nerves and focusing on tapping over aim.
Let me add this to the stream overlay for people that are watching on YouTube. But just a death stream where your cursor is just shaking like crazy.
Oh my god, I love seeing that.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So I think the real answer is that this happens. This is just what happens when you're pushing yourself, and then also nerves do play a role in that as well.
In this case, it actually was mostly nerves, but yeah, hyper focusing on tapping when you're not comfortable in it. Oh my god. You exposed me.
No. So on the topic of nerves, is that something that you have any advice on, or anything that you've learned throughout your time playing Osu for how you can control your nerves?
I wish I knew.
Oh no.
No. There's actually a few tips. Probably, if I think about it. Regarding tournaments, it's a bit different than solo play, probably. So in tournaments, it really, I think, okay, without giving any specific advice, because I think I could talk about specific advice for literally 30 minutes now, but overall, it's figure out why you're nervous. Are you nervous about FCing? Are you nervous about the combo you're holding? Are you nervous about letting your team down in a tournament? Are you nervous about etc., etc.? Figure it out and just come to the conclusion that it doesn't matter. Just come to the conclusion that what you're doing is clicking circles on your screen, and it's just that. And maybe it's also just an ADHD kind of thing, but stimulate your brain. Maybe chew gum or anything. That helped for me. So, like, distract yourself. But then, of course, you lose focus on the maps, and you get it.
Yeah.
Double-edged sword.
I actually agree with that 100%. I want to take it sort of one step further, where you ask yourself, like, are you nervous because of the score or the combo or whatever else? But you should keep taking that one step further and ask yourself, okay, if I'm nervous about my combo, why am I nervous about the combo? Is it because I'm about to get a new top play? Or is it because this is my new personal best? And then you ask yourself again, why am I nervous about getting a new personal best? Is it because you've been grinding for 1 year and you haven't been able to get any like good scores, or like haven't been able to beat your old scores, or whatever it is? Just keep asking why, keep digging deeper. And then I feel like what you're sort of saying is that eventually you'll reach the point where, like, there's really no reason in the first place? Like once you dig really deep into it.
I like that approach, but just in the point where you are nervous, it's not really practical
Okay,
to
yeah.
apply, I think.
It's
Because
more of a yeah.
that's like where you have to make the click in your head, and I think that has to happen beforehand.
Right. It's more of like between maps or just I don't know, when you're thinking about it. So maybe as you're falling asleep, you can reflect back on all the times you were nervous and try to think about it.
Why did I choke over Mochi Clover?
No, if only I didn't shake. So a couple other specific questions came in. Someone asked you, what do you think of the Shimon method to get speed, which is play stuff that's way, way outside your comfort zone until you can't play anymore, then take a break and play it again. Basically, shredding hard. What are your thoughts on this method of gaining speed?
Well, I mean, I like shredding. Shredding is a good idea because it's essentially just pushing yourself. Kind of depends on how hard you shred, though. If you shred that much that you get 30%, you shouldn't really do that, I think. I don't think much about that. Like, I don't think much about that. How do I say it? I don't think it's good. That's how I put it. So push yourself to a degree. If you're getting D ranks, it might be too hard.
What about C ranks? Is that okay?
Really depends. Really depends. I think sometimes it's good to get. Sometimes it's even good to get a D rank just to like benchmark. But like regularly, like if I had a map and I get like 50% on it and I played like 3 times, then I don't see the improvement. I mean, unless I do, but usually you don't, unless you're like warming up. C ranks. I don't want to set like a clear line.
Right.
80% is what you have to get until it's like no, it's different. Every map is different. Some maps are harder to act than others. It depends on the OD, it depends on the rhythm complexity, it depends on so many things. General rule of thumb, if you don't know what the fuck is going on, it might be too hard.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. The way I sort of see it is like the map needs to feel challenging, but it also needs to feel doable at the same time. You sort of need both of those. Doable, not really in the sense of FC, maybe it is, but doable in the sense that you can actually kind of hold your own and get a decent, I guess, comfort level on the map.
Amazing.
All right, another question. They said, this is a mindset problem. You already talked about it, but I was in the middle of Skywars, so I couldn't ask. Okay. They said, when you warm up, should you care about accuracy in the first few maps, such as when you're playing long stream practice? So I guess this actually applies to what we were just talking about, but should you care that much about accuracy when you're when you just get on for the first time?
Okay, so when I get on and I play like trash, at the first map I just play through because I know the second run I will have 90% or above, usually. If you play through and you realize, oh, now that I play it a second time, I still cannot do anything like any better. Maybe then the map is too hard. Maybe then the map is too hard. But of course, when playing your first maps, your ag will be very bad compared to when you're warm. You can kind of do what I do when warming up is a bit different. You can throw yourself in the cold water, get a D rank for 2 maps, and then like you're good to go. Or you like somewhat play easier maps, like what I said earlier, challenge yourself in the moment. And if you can only play 4-star maps when warming up, then you play 4.5, for example, until you go to the point where you say, okay, this is my comfort zone. This is usually my peak. Do either. And caring about accuracy, you should always care about accuracy, but you shouldn't wonder, like, it's like you can still push yourself hard, if that makes sense.
Is accuracy its own skill, or is it just a byproduct of getting better at the other skills?
Ooh, Deep question. Deep question. um, Mostly a byproduct of all the skills working well together. The only aspect of accuracy skill I see is being able to read, recognize, and play rhythm complexity, and the ability to hold low UR in brackets Umbra. That's what I think is an accuracy skill. It is closely tied into other skill sets. So, for example, your tapping. But we could say that player X is able to stream 300, and player Y is able to stream 300. Yet they get completely different X because, well, first of all, their tapping is different, but isn't the way that the tapping differs the accuracy skill? Or is that your tapping as well?
Okay,
You
I
get my
see.
point?
Yeah, so it's like there is a slight component of accuracy, which mostly is like getting super, super refined unstable rate, like 80, 70, 60, or even lower than that with unstable rate. But what you're saying is that there's another component that's basically your actual skill level. That is your actual tapping, stamina, and speed, and even your ability to read the rhythm properly. Like there's so many different things that can affect your accuracy. There is a raw accuracy component, but it's only one small piece of the your actual overall accuracy.
Yeah, pretty much. It's I think way too far thought though. Like it's funny to think about, but it's not essential for your gameplay or improvement.
Yeah, I agree with that. So someone asked, how do you learn spaced streams? Do you focus more on the aim slash acceleration of your aim? And also, how do you know when to tap?
What I said earlier, relax method. My tapping is completely subconscious. I don't think about it at all. I try to time my aim to the song and to my visuals. You can cheese a bit around. For example, I would have to visually show that. Maybe you can think about long stream practice maps, and you know how there's 64 nodes until you complete the entire shape of a square. So one side of the square has 16 nodes ish, or 17 nodes if you count the corners in. You will start tapping on the corners on your starting finger. So if you start the stream on your index finger, you will also land on your index finger on the other corner, and all the other corners actually, because the combos are on uneven numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. And you can time angle changes in space streams according to your finger tap. That is like very, very far thought, but that's something I used to do. So when I have a high like a spacing change or like a direction change, an angle in a space stream after 5 nodes, I kind of had like the intuition to change the flow of my aim when I had my 5th tap.
That reminds me, you know the ending stream in Utah, the one that's like space and a lot of people
Yes.
like chain miss it. That stream is actually the corner is I think it's on the 8 instead of the 9 or something like that.
Yes. Yes. I think that's. I think it doesn't really have like a clear corner, does it? Let me
Well,
actually check.
it does, but the rhythm is not like normal. Like it's cut like a little early or something.
Let me actually check.
Yeah, sure. But yeah,
That's,
that's a good
but
point
yeah.
in general.
Yep. Uta. Oh my god. Why do I find 2,000 songs when typing Uta?
But yeah, I think keeping in mind that sort of like the rhythm aspect, it sort of sounds like you do want to learn. Basically, you should learn streams before you learn space streams. Space streams are basically the next step up as your tapping stamina starts to improve more and it starts to be more comfortable to where you can start to put it on autopilot. You still looking for the Uta stream?
I think it is actually an uneven number.
Yeah, I think it's 8. Like on the 8th note is the corner instead of 9.
Let me just screenshot and send just to make sure we're on the same line here.
Yeah, that one. I think it's that last corner. Oh, it kind of cuts on the 7.
Yeah, so that would be an uneven. Yeah, oh, the 7. Yeah, the 7 isn't on a white tick. The 7 is on a red tick. But not on a blue tick. But not on a blue tick.
Okay, I see. Yeah, but still, it's like the corner. Usually, it's like on the 5 or the 9 or 17 or something like that. But
yeah, on white ticks usually.
Yeah, on the white ticks is when you have the corners. But yeah, here it's like it's basically a little earlier than you would expect. So I'm curious if you have any general. I feel like we've touched on a lot of principles that apply for improvement, which is very, very helpful. But actually, one skill set we can talk about very briefly is probably high AR. I think that also relates to speed. Is that something you can comment on?
There are a few small things that help when playing higher AR, like certain skins, follow points, maybe gamma if you like. Refresh rate really is just a small factor in my opinion. But yeah, adds to it probably. Yeah. Snaking sliders. Snaking sliders can make it a bit harder, I think.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because you see the entire slider earlier, so it's noticed easier.
Oh, interesting.
But besides that, it's hard grind. Like I wouldn't try to play around too much with all the shenanigans. I would usually just pick a somewhat decent skin, or you can play with the Rapha skin, for example. But then I just hard grind and try to improve instead of getting other things that make me improve. It's kind of like the wrong mindset, in my opinion. It's like people buying the booting keyboard to improve their tapping, but they don't realize that their ability isn't changing, just their input a little. So yes, the result might change a tiny bit, but you're not getting better, just your hardware. And that's kind of what Gamma does, in my opinion. Or like all the shenanigans. And the more you handicap yourself, the more you're gonna challenge yourself. So, hey.
That's true. That is true. You made a video reviewing the wooden keyboard very recently.
Yes.
I would recommend everyone go check out KHZ's YouTube channel. But
let's go.
Do you have any, or is there a sort of brief description of what your thoughts are on the wooden keyboard?
If you play Trackmania, go buy it. If you don't, only buy it if you have the money, and only buy it if you don't have a good keyboard already. If you already got a mechanical keyboard that's functioning, there's no need to switch. It's more effort, I think, to relearn to a new keyboard than you get from actually the rapid trigger function.
Yeah, I basically came to the same conclusion as well. It's like, if you're not already on the market for a new keyboard, then it's probably not worth it, especially for OSU. Or especially for like casual use. Like if you basically only play OSU and then otherwise just kind of use the computer just casually, then yeah, I feel like that's probably like, actually nobody listening to this is probably like that, but yeah, still that's sort of what I think. But you mentioned Trackmania. Is there a specific reason why it
It's
helps?
an analog keyboard, so there's different input strength. If you push the key down half the way, you're gonna only steer half the way.
Okay, so it's kind of like the control stick or like a joystick on a controller.
It emulates a controller.
Ah, okay, that's very cool.
So for racing games, it's pretty pog.
Interesting. That's actually really cool.
What do you think about comparing players' speed on different playstyles? I don't really think much about comparing players in general.
Oh, I think they're talking about like comparing like a TapX player speed versus a, I guess, ZX player
Oh,
speed.
uh, still the same thing.
Okay.
I think it's just personal preference, to be honest. But there might be something in terms of anatomy that might help to your speed, but I wouldn't overthink it, to be honest.
So I'm curious if you have any sort of final thoughts or opinions or anything that you want to share with the world. I know we talked about a lot of different sort of general principles when it comes to improving and how you can think about things, as well as your sort of history as a player and long stream practice maps, and I'm sure all the other things that people mostly associate you with. But are there any main like principles or like, I guess, best like things that you would want everyone to keep in mind when it comes to improving?
I mean, I can also, of course, always say the basics, like it is a game. You need to enjoy it to improve. Have goals, have fun. The basics, the classics.
Yeah, there's another
But
classic. Subscribe to KHC on YouTube.
yes, instant speed boost by 10 BPM.
Yes.
Confirmed. Definitely. And to Hypno as well. Boosts your all-round skill set.
True. Boosts your nothing apparently.
You will get one pending batch pending.
Oh, true.
Pending TM.
It will always be pending. You'll have a profile badge that's just always on the way.
Pending.
But yes, thanks again, KHC. And I'm sure if anyone wants to reach out to you or find more of your wisdom, they can find you.
Osu. DM me on Osu. I answer every questions. Unless they're like, how do I improve? Then give me specific questions. But DM me on Osu. I read them.
How do you improve? You can answer it once here. How do you improve?
Play more. Challenge yourself more, please.
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, vague questions get vague answers. So
yes, exactly.
That's something that's really important to keep in mind. But yes, thank you again, KHC. Are there any other places people can find you other than your Osu profile and I guess your YouTube?
Twitter and Twitch, I guess. Twitch is KHC_Osu. Twitter is just at KHC_Osu, one word.
All right, awesome. Yep. And yes, thanks everyone for tuning in. And then once again, KHC for taking all this time to answer our epic questions. And
thank you.
Yes, we will see you all next time.
All right, see you guys.